All right, welcome everybody to this information session on writing molecular Foundry user proposals. My name is Shannon Siston. I'm the user program director at the Molecular Foundry, and I'm joined today by some wonderful panelists, Brett Helms, Sinead Griffin, Jim Siston, Kim Ahmad Shefferly, Brooke, and Geeting Chen. And these kind of span staff, proposal review board members, and users. And so first I'm going to go through a few slides kind of talking about our process, elements of our proposals. I will show you one sample proposal, sorry, I should say example proposal, not a sample only proposal, an example standard proposal, and introduce our panelists and then kind of open it up with opportunities for panelists to weigh in on tips or suggestions they have about writing effective proposals, and then have time for questions from all of you as well. So I'll frame this by saying that our user program provides access to users from around the world to cutting edge nanoscience and expertise, instrumentation in our collaborative, multidisciplinary, and safe environment. So we aim to have a fair and transparent review process. We want to minimize barriers for access and be responsive to user needs. Just a general overview. Today I'm going to talk mostly about our standard proposals. So we have 2 proposal calls per year, one in the spring, one in the fall for standard proposals. These are around 3 pages and they're completed online, submitted through our user portal. They go through kind of an NSF or NIH style external peer review. And accepted projects have a duration of 1 year, up to 1 year, and follow-on proposals are encouraged to continue that work. Access is free for non-proprietary research intended for publication, and the IP is owned by the inventors. And I'll mention just a little bit about a different mode for proprietary research as well. So in general, we've got our cycle here of outreach and proposal submission. Proposals go on for review. Users go through training and onboarding. Our staff facilitate the research work of users on site or remotely. And then there's some reporting of publication of the outcomes, and round and round it goes. For those of you who are more interested in what are these phases of the review, after a proposal is submitted, first it gets a look by our user program office staff, and we're checking for completeness and make sure that proposal is just kind of in the right space. And then it goes on to our scientific staff. So they perform a feasibility evaluation of the proposal, basically kind of answering the question, do we have the technical capabilities and expertise to support this work? It then goes off to our external proposal review board. So first they kind of do a preliminary review of the proposals independently, and then they come together as a group, either on site or lately virtually, to discuss and arrive at a ranking for each proposal. In this phase, actually in this phase and these, they're already within kind of buckets or bins for the relevant facility. So the folks that are reviewing any given proposal are technical experts in that area. Once these are ranked, it goes on to our facility directors. So director for each of the 7 facilities looks at the set of proposals, kind of capability by capability, to determine how much we can take. So they kind of start from that highest ranked and kind of step down until we reach this is how much we can support. Proposals that are approved then need to have an additional safety review and go through contract execution. So there's a contract that goes in place between LBNL and the home institution of the user, and then projects can start. Projects that are not approved receive notification of the decision and some feedback from the proposal review board that you can consider for possible resubmission in the future. And I want to add that many users who submit proposals do take advantage of an opportunity to consult staff prior to submission. So our user program office staff can support you in answering some questions about kind of nuts and bolts, about the process, about your proposal. And then our scientific staff are really kind of key persons to provide insights into feasibility and scope, kind of technical details of your proposed work. I want to say just a little bit about our users. So we do get users from a wide variety of affiliations. This looks at those who submitted proposals in fall 2020. So we do have folks that are local, you know, from the Foundry, from Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, but not the Foundry, and from UC Berkeley. But we get a large number of our proposals from other academic institutions from across the US, from around 30 states each year. And then also internationally, we draw proposals from around 25 or 30 nations each year. And we have some others from other US national labs. And then our industry population is pretty important for us too. We're lucky to have kind of a vibrant startup community in the Bay Area, but we also draw proposals from other sectors of industry as well. And the proposal review board, which we assemble twice per year, is about 50 people distributed across those 7 facilities. And we want to do what we can to have a proposal review board that is technical experts that are representative of our user base. So you can see some information here about, you know, a few ways that our reviewers are distributed. We want to make sure that we have you know, people that are coming from academia and industry and national lab, people that are coming from all over the US and actually internationally as well. We want to make sure that we have multiple genders represented. So we want to try to have a fair process, and you know, we check in once in a while, and we're finding that in general our success rates are pretty consistent across affiliation, gender, and first-time PI status as well. So after thinking about our process, I want to zone in a little bit on the proposals themselves. So there are kind of 4 main elements of each proposal, and you can see what they are here, along with point allocations. So this is how they are weighted in the review process. So project goals and significance, you know, what's your motivation, long-term goals, put it in the context of your field of study, and then what's your immediate goal? We'll come back to this idea a lot. What's your immediate goal in the context of 1-year Foundry project? What's your plan and timeline? So why are and how are Foundry capabilities and expertise needed to realize this immediate goal that you identified? Which will be the lead facility of our 7 facilities, and what are any support facilities? And then a resource request where you describe in fair amount of detail within those, you know, page limitations, what's your plan? What work will be done at your home institution? What parts of the work will be done at the Foundry? And what's the timeline associated with that? And then relevant experience. So of the, you know, 2 to 5 people that would be coming as part of this, this proposal, what's their level of training? What's their area of expertise? And when the reviewers are looking at that, they're making judgment calls on how likely is this proposed work to advance scientific or technological field, produce impactful publications. Is it achievable within a year? So that scope question is always important. Does it contribute to research at your home institution? And then how well are we taking advantage of resources? So is the request justified? Does it take advantage of unique capabilities and expertise? And then what's the relevant experience? So are the users adequately prepared with a good track record? So I'm going to show you an example proposal, but I want to let you know that if you haven't found them already, we have more tips and examples available on the website. So from our main Foundry page, if you go to the user program section, there's a proposal guide. And there you can find additional examples. So we'll look at one, but you can find more. So I will switch over to showing you this. So I have one example, anonymized, but generously shared with permission by the authors. So this is one on atomic scale optical and electronic properties. of engineered quantum emitters and 2D transition metal dichalcogenides. So I want to highlight just a few things here. In this project goals and significance section, you can see that they have contextualized kind of within the scientific field, why is this important? They're framing this technological impact of the work. They go on to kind of identify a particularly promising class of materials. And you can see they've got reference citations here that are making their point that this is a credible choice. They have a very clear and direct statement of what they want to study. So this is what we propose to study. They go on to talk a little bit about their own prior work in the area and do this kind of nice thing where you say, this is all that's done so far, but then this missing piece still needs to happen, and this is what we're going to do here. They identify specifically who on the staff would be supporting or collaborating with them. They talk about two complementary approaches. They're going to do two things that are going to work together productively. You can see they've taken advantage of an opportunity to include some images here. Images can be really powerful at giving your reader an intuitive sense of what your idea is, why the work's important. So you want to think about clear and relevant images that are connected to the text. In this need for the Foundry section, so they start out right away by asserting that they're taking advantage of unique capabilities and synergies among the different facilities. So that they're making a persuasive case here that the Foundry is really the best place to do this work. And then in this project plan and timeline, you can see they're pretty detailed, right? So this is the first piece, it's going to take this long. This next piece is going to take that long. So they're kind of breaking it out for us because that question is important. Will this really be doable within a year? And they talk about, which parts of the work are going to happen at the home institution, which parts of the work are going to happen at the Foundry. And in this relevant experience piece, so they're connecting to, the important elements of the proposal. We have expert knowledge in this. We're trained on such and such instrumentation. So those kind of questions are important to persuade that, yes, we can be successful in this work, and to give a sense for the reader of how much, how trained you are, how much effort will be associated with completing the work. So you can find this proposal and others up on our website for your reference. Okay. Take a quick moment to let you know about a few other proposal types. So besides our standard proposal, we have sample-only proposals. That's a request for a single sample of material that the Foundry has available. A lot of times it's connected to some recent publication that say, can we have some of that so that we can do our work with it as well? You can submit that anytime. Instrument-only proposals can request a maximum of 2 instruments. So whereas the standard proposal can access, one or more, number of instruments, multiple facilities, and really has kind of an intellectual engagement in the work on the part of the staff. It's more collaborative. Instrument-only proposals, it's about the instruments. So it's access to the instruments. The personnel should already be trained on the instruments, and it's for 6 months. We've recently widened our window for submission of instrument-only proposals, but it is still excluded during the kind of 6 weeks that are most intensive of our standard proposal review. And then we have rapid access proposals. These are kind of like a fast track proposal to access in between the standard proposal call, but the access only lasts until the next standard proposal window. So it's just kind of a bridge to get somebody in a little bit faster to then be able to do their standard work. And we have a limited number of these slots available throughout the year because that capacity determination step is taken pretty seriously. So, really, how much do we have capacity for? So there might not be a lot of capacity for a lot of rapid access proposals. And this one, submission of these is excluded during our full standard proposal call and review process. We do have a number of industry users, so around 50 companies per year work with us. And I think we're really proud of the work that we do to be able to support kind of this early stage development. So industrial users, most of our industrial users go through this non-proprietary mode that really I've been talking about this whole time, but there is an opportunity to have a proprietary proposal instead. So if that's something that interests you, I encourage you to reach out to us and start that conversation about what it looks like to map out the proprietary mode, where you do have a little bit more protection of that IP, but it is a pay per use model. So there's some details there. So that's all for my kind of expository piece. And I want to turn it over to our panelists now. We have Dr. Brett Helms from our organic facility, a staff scientist, Sinead Griffin, staff scientist from our theory facility, Jim Siston, staff scientist from NSEM, Professor Kimberly Ahmad Shefferly, who's a member of our biological nanostructures proposal review board, and our two users, Dr. Brooke and Dr. Geeting Chen. I'll encourage you panelists to please turn your video feed on, if that's something that you can do to make it just a little easier for us to find you. Kind of some of the prompts I had in mind, I'll kind of present here, but then I will unshare this so that we can see each other nice and big. Kind of wanting to get your take on, in your role as a scientist, PRB member, user, what are you looking for in the review process? Do you have tips for people to try to address the review criteria or work with feedback before or after the proposal submission? So I'll stop the share now. And did that work? Did my sharing stop? Yeah. Okay. And maybe Brett, I'll ask if you can get us started. Do you want to weigh in on anything about what you look for in that feasibility process, or other tips you might have for people writing maybe their first user proposal?
Sure. Hi, I'm Brett from the organic facility. I've been here for about 14 years. So this is, at least my 28th, if not more, because I think we had more proposal cycles in advance of the, twice annual ones that we have now. So I've seen it all, and I hope to see more. And I think that, when proposals come into the facility, we get excited by all the new science that comes in. And proposals tend to move forward most easiest through the feasibility if we actually see what you plan to do. Shannon described that, we have, sometimes companies that come to work here, and lots of people who may not be familiar with our process. They don't know if what's going to happen to their ideas if they put it all out there on the page. Where does it go? Who's going to find out about it? And, so the ethical guidelines for how we handle your material is set forth clearly for all people who handle the proposals at all stages of the review process, including feasibility review. And, when we're looking for whether or not this work can be done in our facility, we need to know exactly what you're doing. What are you going to make? How do you plan to make it? On what scale do you plan to make it? Are there any hazards associated with it? Are we familiar with these processes, or is this, something crazy and wacky that we need to build new engineering controls around? And so all of those kind of, particularly for the synthetic floors, getting us all of the information that we need to get started on those fronts helps us better manage the process for you. And a second part of the question, I think, in those first two prompts were, what's in it for us here at the facility? And so, when we see all these ideas, come, we get excited by them. we're not the arbiters of who chooses, or like of you know, who gets approved to use our facility. That's the proposal review board's process. But you know, what typically happens is the facility directors work with the technical staff and the staff scientists to really kind of find a home for your project. And you know, the extent to which you can maybe identify, you know, who that point person might be for your proposal in advance of your submission might actually help you kind of frame your proposal in a way that makes that connection point solidify in a way that helps us establish that your proposal could have a really good home here, and we could support you in achieving your goals.
Thanks a lot, Brett. Maybe I'll toss it to Sinead now. Do you want to add anything new from the scientific staff perspective on that?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Sinead. I've been here a little less than Brett, so just 2 years. So this is my 5th proposal review cycle. And sort of, so I'm in theory, so we have a little bit of a different perspective of what makes a strong proposal. But to reiterate what Brett said, a clear plan is of prime importance. So to really identify what it is that the theory facility can add to your scientific goals and provide in you reaching the goals of your scientific work. So having a well-defined scope of what the role of theory plays in your particular proposal is really key. So rather than saying, well, we want some theoretical supports for this experiment, but without a clear vision of what that looks like and what the actual calculations or theoretical deliverables are, makes it very difficult for us as well as a facility, as a theory facility, to really figure out what it is that you want. So having that well-defined scope of the role of theory within your proposal is really helpful for us. Then going on to what makes us as theory staff, what makes a good proposal, apart from, you know, obviously doing really cool, interesting science, having some sort of investment, whether that be postdoc time or PhD time, to spend in training, in learning the methods is really helpful for us. We don't have the personnel to do everything ourselves. So with some time investment from your group, we will do the required training and skills transfer to your group members, which also increases the longevity as well of you know, the types of theoretical tools and types of theoretical studies that you can actually perform in your own research group, whether or not you're a theory group or an experimental group. And so having that sort of commitment, as I say, whether it's students or postdocs that can either collaborate remotely or come to the Foundry, is really helpful for us as a theory facility in both assessing the feasibility and our interest in the project as well.
Thanks, Sinead. Jim, do you want to give a perspective from NSEM and what makes a great proposal for NSEM?
Yeah, so on the characterization side, you know, for the proposals that we receive at NSEM, definitely want to echo what both Brett and Sinead said about being specific. You know, certainly having a plan. What materials will you look at? What specific techniques do you intend to use? You know, and but sort of related to that, what actual piece of material science information are you after? Because sometimes, you know, you may be asking for a particular technique, but there might be a better way to do it. And if the review board can understand like what piece of information you're after, you know, as experts in the field, they can also help assess, you know, even if you didn't ask for this particular technique, we can maybe still do it, and that can work out. I think another aspect is, you know, definitely keep the 1 year proposal timeline in mind. You know, so I think a very frequent reason that proposals get rejected by our PRB is someone is asking to look at, you know, 17 aliquots of 5 different sample preparation processes to characterize sizes of nanoparticles, and it's going to take, you know, they would need to be on the microscope every 3rd day for the entire year to make this happen. There's just not simply that much time. So I think, you know, understanding the you know, the amount of resources and being clear about the amount of resources that you're looking for is very helpful. Another aspect that Sinead mentioned as well is training. And so, you know, like theory, you know, if you're coming to the electron microscopy facility and you've never seen a TEM before, each of our staff manages 20 or 30 proposals. And so training up someone from zero to to being an independent expert user, we generally don't have the staff time to do that for every single user. So if you're able to take advantage of courses at your home institution to like graduate courses in operation of instrumentation or these kinds of things, that's very, very helpful. And so you should be very clear in the section on the personnel of the proposal, exactly what sort of training and what sort of instruments someone has had. And that's also where including images in your proposal is very helpful, especially for the various characterization facilities. Is if you can demonstrate that you're competent enough in characterization to get such and such an image, then that lets the PRB very quickly assess the level of training that may or may not be needed. Another issue that Shannon had mentioned in the introduction is taking advantage of unique features of the facility. So if you're looking to do sort of very low-end screening work of lots and lots of samples, that's a capability that many universities and other places may have in low-end instrumentation. And so if that's the only goal of your proposal, then the justification that the PRB sees may not be quite as high for it, unless you're coming from a place that doesn't have any of those resources. And so that is taken into account, certainly, and that sort of all goes together. Shannon had mentioned synergy in multiple facilities. I will say that the PRB is savvy enough that if someone checks all 6 boxes, because it probably looks better to say I'm going to use every facet of the Foundry, like they're smart enough to know that there's only so much you can do in 1 year. And if you check those boxes for support facilities, you should really have a plan for exactly why you need them and how that really interacts with your proposal, not just, well, I'll check theory and say, well, of course someone will do DFT of my structure once I figure out what it is. And, of course, I'll be able to just go down and do some atomic resolution STM because it's fun, at the same time. So when you do select support facilities, again, the specificity, is important for that kind of thing too.
All right, thanks so much. So next I'm going to turn to our proposal review board member. So Kim, I think we're excited to hear from you about, what PRB members are really looking for, and maybe what are some common areas that are not as strong as you might like to see in that process.
Great, thanks Shannon, and thanks for having me here. So I have served on the PRB for the biological nanostructures facility for many years. I'm not gonna, I can't count them anymore because I don't want to give out how old I am, but essentially one thing to keep in mind when you write these proposals is that it's not like a regular proposal where you have this section on significance and you're arguing for something. This is a user facility proposal, so what the PRB really looks for is a clear scope of work, and that work is can be doable. We also do look for stuff that benefits the Foundry in terms of expertise. So if the work can have an impact on the Foundry in a positive way, that it works synergistically with the research interests of the staff, that also carries a lot of weight too. So if it's a project that's kind of weakly related to staff efforts, then it can detract from our sort of take on the proposal. So that's something to keep in mind. So we want people who know what the Foundry does, who know the staff expertise, what they're really good at, and that the work will work well with that. However, the main reason that proposals often get rejected is that the scope of the work is not clear. And so you have to be really clear about what you're going to do. And I know there's this natural tendency to say, I'm going to do everything, right? And so a lot of first-time users will write a proposal that has way too much in there. And so usually what the PRB will do is to recommend to dial it down so that it's more feasible. As new-time users, first-time users, you have somewhat of a hit against you because everybody has to get trained. So proposals of people who have been around the Foundry for a while, gets not real bonus points, but get essentially looked on more favorably because they know what the Foundry is like and they know what the drill is and so forth. So they're already accustomed to that, and it's less of a burden on the staff time. So when I say be specific, we look for things like numbers of samples, estimates for how much time you're going to be needing on this instrument or that instrument. If we see something where they say, yeah, I'm going to test, screen all these, peptide components, and they give a very vague number, to us that could be like, is that 1,000 peptide components or is it 3, right? And so that makes a huge difference in how we look at a proposal. So that's one thing. And I also want to, and you probably already talked about this, but if you get rejected, it's really easy to go back and fix the things to make it more amenable. And so, a rejection from the Foundry is not like getting rejected from the NIH or the NSF. It's a little different. It's a much, softer barrier. And finally, I think probably the most important thing is to reach out to staff first and talk to them to make sure that your proposal is kind of in line and is a good fit or the right scope. So sometimes proposals come in and you can tell that they have not looked at the repertoire of the staff or talked to the staff at all, and those need a lot of adjustment. So yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And then next I want to turn to our user panelists. Brooke, I don't know if you want to get us started. Any tips or ideas on things that were helpful for you writing proposals, or suggestions on how to work with feedback in that process?
Sure. So yeah, I graduated about half a year ago, and throughout grad school, I wrote a few different proposals for the Foundry, mostly for NSEM. So I can just give some tips from those experiences. So like everyone's been saying already, I think the most important thing for me was just talking to staff. I think they're really the ones who can help make sure that you're getting your research question answered using, the full capabilities of the Foundry. And I was kind of thinking about how I feel like I was pretty lucky to have had a lot of staff contacts at the Foundry, and particularly at NSEM, and how much that helped me. So I wanted to also mention that attending the user meeting is really useful. I know that's kind of far off from now, but I know that for me personally, that's the place where I met a lot of the people who ended up being able to help me through the proposal writing process. I didn't actually end up, it wasn't kind of a formal thing where I wrote a proposal and sent it to a staff member and they gave me specific comments. It was kind of more of an organic, ongoing conversation we were having that I think allowed me to write a good proposal when the time came. And I know that with COVID, it's harder to do that kind of networking. So I also wanted to mention the Molecular Foundry website is really great. And if you're totally new to the Foundry, that's a really good place for you to just read about the different expertise and instrumentation that's available at the Foundry. And that could be kind of a good starting point to figure out the best points of contact for your particular project. And then the other thing is, so everyone's already been saying this already, but to have a clear plan. And I just wanted to mention one thing that I like doing in my proposals. So Shannon mentioned in her example that figures can be really helpful. So in my proposals, in addition to having, your more conventional scientific figures, I usually like to include a figure in the plan section as well. That's kind of a diagram that shows a flow chart of what I'm going to do when and make clear what I want to do at the Foundry and what I'm going to be doing to complement that at my home institution. And Jim was mentioning that sometimes your plans can get too big or too crazy. And I think that the process of making a figure that succinctly summarizes what your plan is can also help you make sure that it's simple enough that you can put it in a figure. So yeah, and then I think my last comment would just be to just remember that even though a proposal is a pretty technical piece of writing, you still have to remember that the people reading it aren't going to be experts in your field. So when I was first starting out in grad school, I remember that reading my advisor's proposals was the best way for me to understand what we were doing in our group. So I would say you can kind of think you're writing to a first or second year grad student level. And I think that'll be a good amount of technical background. So yeah.
Thanks, Brooke. And then Geeting, think you can maybe provide a great perspective from an industry user. Can you tell us a little bit? I feel like a lot of industry users have a tough time knowing just how much detail to share in striking that balance about protecting what they need to protect and giving enough information so that people can make a good decision. Can you weigh in on that for us a little bit?
Sure. So, well, although that one question is still learning to balance we want to share what and the scientist part and what the company want to protect. But I think the first important thing is talk to the staff at the Foundry. They all want to help, but like just talk to them. It's really helpful to more clearly to let them know what we want to do and what Foundry can help us. Like so understand like what level of work we can do at Foundry and in the proposal. It's very helpful. When I write proposal, I learn it's very important is to be like a smart. So it's more like specific, measurable, achievable, relative, and a time bound for the proposal. Since it just like let the staff know how much time we will need and how much time we will use at Foundry and and it's measurable. They can see what we are doing. We are not just black box from them. And so I also agree, like provide some figures to help people know what we are doing and what part we do at Foundry, what parts not. And for my work, since I do the synthesis and the characterization, sometimes I cross different facility. So also, it's very also important to mention in the proposal, like just don't request everything, then only have like 2 people will do everything. That sounds very not realistic. So just talk to staff and to understand what the instrument can do and what we can do. And usually I prefer just write down very clearly, like it's a weekly batch or it's a monthly batch, or even we only use 1 time a year, something like that. Yeah. And so I think so for the proposal also just to get some feedback from the staff, just to learn like what we can improve, or even to learn like sometimes like we have different idea from the earlier year, or we have so many ideas we want to do, just to know like we want separate in different proposal, or just to focus on one project Foundry. That's also important, I think. Yeah. So hope those help.
Thanks. I appreciated hearing from all of you on those prompts. I also want to make sure we have a chance to open it up to questions from our participants here. So if you have a question, you can put it in the chat, or you can go to that little reactions button down there and raise your hand. That'll bring you up to the kind of the top of everybody's field of vision so that we can see you have a question and then call on you. Looks like Jim.
So not a question, I just had one very brief thing to add. We mentioned at various times the specificity of the plan, but keep in mind with the scientific part of it as well. So the review panel may be reviewing 50, 90, 110 of these proposals, and so they're reading a lot of them. And the more very directly and quickly and clearly you can help them grasp the specific concept that you were trying to do, to help them grasp what piece of information you're hoping to get out, the better. And so yes, context is important. Your work obviously doesn't happen in isolation, but you don't have to start from the beginning of time. We have all wondered and so on. Like, so you get to the point very quickly, because these people are reading many dozens of these proposals, and they want to be able to understand as quickly as possible how this fits in to the work that will be done.
Thanks. And yeah, I'll mention we can take questions for our panelists, and we do also have, I see we've got our division deputy and some members of the user program office and some members of our user executive committee. So I think we have a wide variety of people that can potentially chime in on any questions. I see Sophie.
Hi. I was just wondering if the sorry, I missed the start of the meeting, so you may have already said this, but how the marking of the reviews is done, is that something that's available?
So we did touch on that a little bit, I think, if I understand your question. So you're wondering about how kind of the scoring or ranking goes. Yeah. So we have basically four criteria, more or less. Project goals and significance. I don't want to screw it up and pull it up here. Project plan and timeline, resource request, and then relevant experience that have kind of like a weighting associated with them. And I think I can put a link in the chat so that you can read more about that on our website. So that's done by a panel of external experts. So they're kind of grouped by our 7 facilities. So 5 to 10 experts associated with each of those facilities that will first read it independently. So give it an initial score, then come together as a group to discuss it and refine the score. So that's kind of how that does that answer your question?
Yeah, and then is there like a success rate, or do you have a certain number that you give out per?
Sure. Yeah. So unlike a beamline, we don't have like a specific number of hours, for example, that we give out. Our success rate on proposals has been around 70–75%. And we do encourage resubmission of proposals that don't get accepted in the first attempt after some revision. And the kind of that 75-ish%, I would say, is not evenly distributed across various capabilities that the Foundry offers. So some capabilities have a lot more demand and accept a smaller fraction of proposals in that particular area, and then others have less demand and maybe more potential for acceptance. So it kind of varies depending on the demand.
Okay, and is that information available?
I think it probably is. Not a like a bin by bin breakdown, but some general trends. I can maybe send it to you. Do you want me to send it to you?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
And then can I do one more quick one? Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Regarding the section that you're putting down, who will work at the Molecular Foundry, is it okay to have a lot of people in, like, can you put kind of your whole team on there and that's not going to go against you, sort of thing, if you have too many people on one proposal?
That's a good question. I don't know if anybody else wants to weigh in on that. If not, I can give my flavor. I saw Jim unmute. If you want to say something, Jim, you can go ahead.
I'd say it depends a little bit. So there's 2 things. How much training is required? So if you're asking for 1 person to get trained versus 10 people to get trained, that's very different in terms of how it might be scored in terms of the load on the Foundry. So that's one aspect. Another one is that we really like to see 1 proposal per sort of project, per idea, not necessarily 1 per PI. So if you're running a group that's doing 5 different kinds of things with different students, it's not really good to have 1 proposal that encompasses all of that, because that's actually a very enormous amount of work. That each sort of different project should have its own proposal in general. But yeah, definitely think about the training burden in terms of the number of people.
Okay.
A lot of proposals have about 3 people. A lot of it's around that many.
All right, that's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, it looks like Brandon took a question from the chat. Oh, proprietary. Okay, thank you, Brandon, for your response there. And yeah, the details on proprietary and non-proprietary work. So generally, industrial researchers might want to protect intellectual property around work that they're developing. We do have an option for people to work that way. So typically in our non-proprietary mode, there's a lot of intellectual exchange that's happening between the staff and the users. And in a lot of ways, we love that. But we also like being able to support projects that are kind of on that arc in that tech transfer arc. And so for that, there is a mode where you can pay to work per hour at the Foundry and keep that IP protected. And that has to do a little bit with our mission and our funding and you know, that free access for non-proprietary work with intent to publish is a big piece of that DOE mission that we embody in our work. But we have that option for those that may need otherwise. Okay, I saw another question there. Junjia, do you want to say your question?
Yeah, so it's actually our concern. So right now we are writing a patent at UC Davis, and now it's in processing. And we're wondering if we use the instruments from Molecular Foundry, will the UC Davis still own the patent for the device fabricated?
Right, so I think the timeline comes into play there. So, and I think I'll probably refer you, put some links in there to make sure you can get the precise language on the legal end of that.
Yeah, sure.
But kind of, and Brandon, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but my impression of it is sorry, my child, if there's IP that's already yours and you come to the Foundry, it's still yours. If it's IP that you develop while you're already at the Foundry, it's yours and the labs. If it's IP that you yeah, so there are details, and I probably won't get it precisely right, so it's better to refer you to the specific language.
Yeah, sure.
The timeline matters, and things that are developed while you're at the Foundry. Sorry, it's really about joint.
It's okay.
There's a path of joint ownership where, you know, both your home institution and the lab would both have potential to claim that. So see if I can link that in the chat. I see.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I see Elena has a question.
Hi, hello. I'm new to the Foundry, where I just heard about it recently. My question is related to the impact on the Foundry and the staff effort. Where exactly I can obtain maybe more information about the research that the staff or any details about the research that the staff is doing right now, so I can maybe try to connect better my my proposal to their efforts.
Yeah, Sinead, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So the website is actually kept pretty well up to date. So each staff member has a profile with our main capabilities listed on the Foundry website. Also, I'm not really sure exactly where to navigate in the Foundry website, but there's also a list of recent publications that's also kept up to date, both those that have been led by Foundry staff members and also those in collaboration with users. So there's a lot of resources that are already out there. And then if you identify maybe one or two staff members that you think overlap with your interests, then that's the stage to reach out to the staff member and see if they have the skills and capabilities to work with you in your project.
Thank you. Thanks. Wayesh?
Hi, this is Waish. I'm also a new member in Molecular Foundry, and I have a couple of questions. The number one is I just want to know, like, how many proposals are normally accepted in each season? And the second one is, if the proposal is accepted, is there any chance that the proposal, the funding could be extended in the next season or next year?
Yeah, so we are lately accepting somewhere in the kind of 150, 200 kind of range of proposals in each of those standard calls. And as far as extensions, so one thing that's wonderfully flexible about the Foundry is that when you get that approval notification for your proposal, you have up to 1 year to kind of turn it on to activate it. So if you are ready and the staff is ready and the instrumentation is ready, it could be the next day that you start. But if one of those things isn't quite ready yet, you have that 1 year period to get it started. And then you work from a year after that activation. Extensions. So I think we used to have a little bit more of a very firm line about those timelines, or relatively more firm. And now during these COVID times, it's a little bit softer. So we hope that accepted proposals will be able to get going, and but in some cases there are limitations on travel, or maybe it's training that cannot be accomplished remotely or in a distanced way, but really needs to be a side-by-side training for the kind of safety aspect of it. But and so it may need to wait just a little bit longer until we get this pandemic a little bit more under control. So so there are opportunities to have a case-by-case evaluation of those. Now, I'm hoping that things that get accepted in this next round and the one after can start on time, but we'll see how it all goes, right? It's a little bit fluid right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And YS, just in case this was what you're asking, I'm not sure if it was, there's not a separate track for renewal. So, I mean, you can, of course, submit follow-on proposals, in the next cycle, but it goes in the same bin as all the rest of the proposals. And of course, the amount of training is probably less your second time around than the first, but there's not like a fast track extension, renewal track. It's a new submission.
I see. Okay, so we have to submit a new fresh one. Thank you.
Thanks. I see a quick question from Jose, and then we'll go to Arkadeep. Oh yeah, okay, so Brandon replied, every proposal needs to have a PI, a principal investigator. So that has to be somebody that's a faculty member, or an industry researcher. A PhD student could not be the only person on the proposal, but yes, a PhD student plus a PI, absolutely. That's fine, yeah. Arkadeep, do you want to share your question?
It's not a question. I'll just follow up what Professor Kim and Sinead, you mentioned about contacting staff. The advice I had got, I was a user before, and the advice I had got from staff whenever I reached out, that it's easier for them if you break down your email when you're contacting into something like what specific you are doing, or what instruments you need, how much time. All those, what you go in the proposal can also go in the email to the staff, because that helps them reply better. I mean, I've only worked mostly with Nate Human and Tracy Mattox in Inorganic, and that was their advice to me, to make it easier for the staff to respond, because they also receive many emails.
That's true. Direct, persistent, patient. I think that all works with email. Yeah. I see Enrique has a question. Do you have a differentiated track that may go along with LDRD submissions inside the lab? I guess not. Yeah, I mean, that touches on an interesting question. Yeah, kind of all users need to apply to use the Foundry capabilities kind of in the same, out of the same pool. So we do not have a piece of the pool that's broken out for any particular type of user or proposal. Yeah. Yeah. Jose.
Hi. So in terms of the, what the Foundry gets out of our proposals, so is the Foundry kind of looking to have co-authorship of one of their or some of their staff scientists or collaborators in the paper, or kind of just be acknowledged? I think that would kind of help frame the structure of the proposal.
We got a both and model here. Yeah. So we've recently looked at our, our statistics for our publication, and there are, a relatively smaller amount that are kind of just Foundry staff, and a nice big chunk that are Foundry staff and users, co-authors, and then a hefty chunk that's about the same size or so. That's just users that acknowledges the Foundry in their acknowledgement statement, but they're not co-authors. So that's a great conversation to have, with your assigned scientist. What is the level of intellectual engagement? And we definitely take the stance that where there has been some significant contribution by the staff that they should be co-authors. But there's user work where maybe that staff interaction doesn't necessarily rise to the level of co-authorship. I think maybe all of those are kind of within the umbrella of what we can take. I'm not sure if one of our staff scientists you want to comment on that at all about the authorship question? Maybe they mostly agree with what I said. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's very case by case, right? I mean, if the staff made significant intellectual contributions, then they generally should be authors. If it was less so, like purely training, or that's the door you walk in to use the HPLC, that's we obviously are not an author on that on that paper, and so it's about half and half,
yeah,
or so, depending on the details of each individual project.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're getting pretty close on time here. So I saw Arkadeep's hand next.
Yeah, so a quick question was to Geeting, because she manages the industry part, and if it's also non-proprietary, is that very subjective, like what she decides to be non-proprietary, or if she can share a little bit, because I'm getting a lot of questions from industry potential users.
Do you mean
So,
like what we should put in proposal? So
no. Sorry, Geeting, not what you put in proposal, but while doing the work at Foundry, how do you maintain that balance between what is non-proprietary so that you can share?
Oh, what does it's non-proprietary and what is proprietary? I think the first, like when we come to a Foundry, what we want to do, usually you already know it's for company side, we already know it's proprietary or it's non-proprietary. Like we only use instrument to do some characterization. It's very routine work. I don't think it's proprietary. Yeah, but if you want to develop a new thing, new device or new synthesis molecule, and involve so many discussion with the Foundry staff, that would be need to discuss with the staff.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, and I'm just gonna yeah, okay, so Brandon gave a quick response to Sophie. Yes, there can be opportunity to adapt your plan, but not, I heard the phrase scope gallop earlier this week, so no scope gallop. Some small modifications can
the trot.
Yeah. All right, we've come to 2 o'clock. I want to ask you to join me in thanking our panelists. I'm so glad to have your perspectives here, and thank you so much to our participants too. We're really glad to have a good turnout for this, and if you have additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us. If we've got a Foundry user office email, or you can find contact for individual staff members on the website as well. So thanks very much, everybody. Wish you well.